Jessa Whitmore's knees buckled just as the finish line came into view, the crowd's cheers blurring into a distant hum before everything went black. She didn't even feel herself hit the pavement. The next thing she knew, she was staring into a pair of piercing gray eyes, panic tightening her chest before a wave of cool calm washed over her. A man knelt beside her, one hand gently cupping the back of her head, the other steadying her shoulder. "You're okay," he said firmly, his voice deep and steady. "You fainted. Stay with me." Her throat was dry, her lips barely able to form words. "Water." "Already got it," he said, reaching behind him and uncapping a bottle. He helped her sit up slowly, holding the bottle to her lips. Small sips. Jessa blinked, her vision sharpening. She was still on the race path, surrounded by volunteers and medics, but all she could focus on was the man holding her like she might break. He wasn't dressed like a runner. In fact, he looked like he'd stepped out of some high-end fashion ad: black slacks, tailored coat, crisp white shirt rolled at the sleeves. Not a trace of sweat on him. Definitely not here for the marathon. She swallowed hard. "I'm okay. You weren't breathing right. You collapsed," he said, not moving an inch. "Do you have any medical issues?" She shook her head, her curly ponytail bouncing weakly. "Just didn't eat enough this morning. I thought I'd be fine." "You ran 26 miles. You need more than a granola bar," he muttered, glancing up as a medic approached. "She needs to be checked out," the medic said, kneeling beside her. "Sir, we've got it from here." The man hesitated. Only then did Jessa notice the slight tension in his jaw. He stood slowly, but not before brushing a loose curl from her forehead. "Make sure she's taken to the medical tent." Jessa watched as he turned and disappeared into the crowd like a ghost in Armani. 2 hours later, she sat on a cot with an electrolyte drink in her hand and a blanket over her shoulders. She'd finished the marathon barely, but her mind kept replaying that moment. Those eyes. That voice. "Who was that guy?" she asked the nurse, checking her vitals. "Which guy?" "The one who helped me. Tall, dark coat, didn't look like a runner." "Oh, him." The nurse raised a brow. "That was Preston Kade." Jessa blinked. "Who? You don't know who Preston Kade is?" The nurse gave a short laugh. "CEO of Kade Ventures? Real estate, tech, private equity. He's like one of the richest men in the country." Jessa stared at her, stunned. Why was he even here? Some charity thing. His company donated a bunch to the marathon's children's hospital fund. He showed up to make an appearance, I guess. Her heart thudded. A billionaire had knelt beside her while she lay unconscious on the pavement like a complete disaster. Fantastic. Later that night, freshly showered and wrapped in sweats, Jessa curled up on her couch with a heating pad on her legs. Her apartment was tiny, barely enough space for her and her plants, but it was hers. After losing her job at the marketing firm 3 months ago, she'd been working part-time at a bakery and tutoring high schoolers just to pay rent. The marathon had been her goal, her way of proving she still had control over something. She hadn't expected to pass out, or to be rescued by a man who probably flew helicopters for fun. The door buzzed. She frowned. It was past 10. She wasn't expecting anyone. She padded to the intercom. "Hello? Miss Whitmore," a man's voice said. "I have a delivery for you." "A delivery?" "Yes, from Mr. Preston Kade." Her heart jumped. She buzzed him in, and moments later, a tall man in a suit handed her a sleek black gift bag. She stared at it. "What is this?" "I was asked to deliver it personally." "Good night, ma'am." He left before she could ask anything else. She opened the bag slowly. Inside was a soft envelope with her name handwritten in perfect penmanship. "Jessa, I didn't get a chance to properly check you were okay. I hope you've recovered. You ran a full marathon. That takes strength. I admire that. Please accept this as something small to help you rest." Preston, her fingers trembled as she reached into the bag and pulled out a silk robe, deep plum, soft as air, and a gift card to a luxury spa. Her jaw dropped at the amount on it. She sat there stunned. Who even did things like this? Her phone rang. It was her best friend, Margot. "Did you seriously faint into the arms of a billionaire today?" Margot said the second she picked up. I didn't faint into his arms. I fainted near him. Oh my God, Jessa. This is the stuff of romance novels. You're gonna marry him. Stop. No, I'm serious. He sent you a silk robe. That's rich guy for... I'm interested. Jessa laughed. Even though her heart was racing, there was no way. He was probably just being polite. Generous. Billionaire generous. He was probably already back in some penthouse sipping whiskey with models or something. Still. Her hand brushed the note again. And it wasn't just what he'd written. It was how he'd looked at her. Like he saw her. The next morning, she was back at the bakery, apron dusted with flour, when the bell over the door jingled and everything in her chest went still. Preston Kade walked in. He looked disarmingly casual in dark jeans and a leather jacket, but his eyes found her instantly. She froze mid-wipe of the counter. You came here. I wanted to make sure you were really okay, he said, stepping closer. And I figured I owed you a proper introduction. She blinked. You don't owe me anything. I disagree. He glanced around, then back at her. You fainted at a marathon. I caught you. That makes us something. She laughed, caught off guard. Something? At the very least, coffee acquaintances. His voice lowered. Unless you're free for dinner instead. Jessa stared at him, stunned. You want to have dinner with me? I haven't stopped thinking about you since yesterday. He said it so simply, so directly, it made her heart skip. But she gestured helplessly. You're you. And you're Jessa, he said. And yesterday you ran farther than I probably could. You're smart, determined, and you didn't even flinch when I showed up at your bakery. I flinched, she said quietly. He smiled. Maybe. But you didn't run. That matters. She wiped her hands on her apron, nerves fluttering. I get off at 6. I'll pick you up. As he walked out, she leaned against the counter, heart pounding. Margot was right. This was the stuff of romance novels. And somehow it was happening to her. At exactly 6 o'clock, the bakery's bell rang again, but this time Jessa was ready. She'd peeled off her apron, scrubbed the flour from under her nails, and changed into the only dress in her closet that wasn't work-appropriate or marathon-themed, a navy wrap that hugged her waist and made her feel like she wasn't just surviving, but maybe, just maybe living. Preston stood just inside the doorway, browsing a display of almond croissants while pretending not to watch her. When she approached, he looked up with a glint of approval that wasn't subtle. You clean up well, he said, standing straighter. You should see me after a full night's sleep, she replied, trying to sound breezy even though her pulse was hammering in her ears. He held the door for her, and the moment they stepped outside, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. A driver in a charcoal suit stepped out and opened the back door. This is a lot, she said under her breath, hesitating. You don't have to get in, Preston said, watching her carefully. We can walk. Or find a taco truck. Just say the word. She turned to him. Do you always offer alternatives when someone looks nervous? Only when I want them to say yes. She slid into the car. The restaurant wasn't just upscale, it looked like the kind of place where the menu didn't have prices and the wine list was heavier than a textbook. The maitre d' greeted Preston by name and led them to a private table near a window overlooking the river. Candlelight flickered off glass panels, casting golden patterns across the tablecloth. Jessa sat stiffly, unsure where to put her hands. Relax, Preston said, settling across from her. It's just dinner. Just dinner usually doesn't come with valet service and water poured from a bottle that probably costs more than my phone bill. Then let's make it feel normal. He leaned back, studying her. Tell me something about you that has nothing to do with running or fainting. She exhaled slowly. I used to collect snow globes. Had dozens. Every place I traveled, I brought one back. What happened to them? Sold most of them when I moved here. Rent doesn't care about sentiment. He nodded, then tilted his head. Why the move? I got a job offer. Or thought I did. The marketing firm closed a month after I started. I stayed anyway. I figured if I could make it here, I could make it anywhere. Didn't expect to be serving scones while proving your resilience. Exactly. The waiter arrived, and for the next hour, Jessa tried not to gawk while Preston ordered dishes she couldn't pronounce but ended up loving. Every time she thought he'd be pretentious or dismissive, he surprised her with a dry sense of humor, with how intently he listened, with the way he asked questions that made her feel like her answers mattered. When dessert came, he pushed the plate toward her. "Try the mousse. It'll ruin all future chocolate for you." She took one bite and closed her eyes. "Okay, I see what you mean." He watched her for a moment, then said, "You're not used to this, are you? Being fed like royalty by a man who owns more square footage than I've ever seen in my life?" "No, not exactly. I didn't bring you here to impress you." "You didn't. I brought you here because you fascinate me." She blinked. "Why?" "You're the opposite of everyone in my world," he said simply. "They pretend to care about things. You actually do." She stared at him, trying to understand the man across from her. He had the kind of face that turned heads, but there were shadows behind his eyes, like he'd seen things that didn't match the beauty of his surroundings. "What about you?" she asked. "Tell me something you don't say in every interview." He was quiet for a beat. "I used to play piano. Competitively. Recitals, scholarships, the whole thing." She leaned in, surprised. "What happened?" "My father happened. He thought music was a distraction. Said I could choose between college or chasing fantasy. I chose logic. Do you miss it?" "Every day. But missing something doesn't bring it back." The air between them shifted. It wasn't light anymore, it was charged with something deeper. Not quite sadness, but not far from it either. He looked down, then back up. "You make it hard to stay detached. Was that the plan?" "Always is. Until it isn't." Outside, the night had deepened, the city glowing against the river like a painting in motion. Preston led her to the car, but instead of opening the door, he paused. "I have a place nearby," he said quietly. "There's a rooftop view I think you'd like. No pressure. Just more conversation. No staff." She hesitated for half a second, then nodded. The building they entered was all glass and silence, the elevator fast and smooth. When the doors opened, she stepped out onto a private terrace that overlooked the city skyline, the lights stretching endlessly in every direction. Preston poured 2 glasses of something pale and bubbling and handed one to her. "This is unreal," she said softly, staring at the view. "I come up here when I need to remember why I work so hard." She turned to him. "Does it help?" "Sometimes. Right now it does." They stood in silence, the city humming below them. Then he said, "You don't owe me anything, Jessa. Not your time. Not your attention. But I'm hoping you'll give me both for a little while, at least." She looked up at him, caught off guard by the vulnerability in his voice. "Why me?" "Because you didn't ask for anything. And I can't stop wanting to give you everything." She felt her breath catch, not from the words, but from how much he meant them. And suddenly, the rooftop didn't feel quite so high. Not when he was standing beside her. Jessa stood on the rooftop with Preston, the lights of the city flickering like distant stars beneath them, but her thoughts were louder than the skyline was bright. Every part of this night had been unreal, intoxicating, yes, but also strangely fragile, like a dream that might vanish the moment she exhaled. Preston poured the last of the champagne into her glass and leaned against the railing, his gaze fixed outward. "I'm not used to this," he said quietly. Her brow lifted. "To what?" "Rooftop views of your own buildings. To not knowing what someone's going to say next." She turned to him slowly. "You mean, people usually only tell you what you want to hear." He gave a short breath of a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "They usually ask what I want first." Jessa traced the rim of her glass, her voice low. "You ever wish you weren't?" "You?" He glanced sideways at her, considering. "Sometimes I think about what it would have been like if I'd never taken over the company. If I'd just disappeared, started over somewhere that didn't know my last name." "Why didn't you?" "My brother." She looked up, surprised. "He was 10 when our dad died. I was 23. Someone had to keep it all together. He was still a kid. Our mother wasn't equipped." Jessa didn't speak for a moment. "You raised him." "In a way. I kept the name clean, kept the empire afloat. I made sacrifices so he wouldn't have to." She studied his profile, seeing the weight behind his perfectly tailored exterior. "Is he still around?" "Lives in London now. Finance. Married." Happy. Preston's voice was careful. He doesn't look back. Jessa hesitated. Do you? Only at night. When things get quiet. She folded her arms, the wind lifting her curls slightly. You don't strike me as the kind of man who lets things get quiet often. I didn't, until recently. Their eyes met. You made it quiet, he said, without even trying. A long silence stretched between them, and when he stepped closer, she didn't move away. But then her phone vibrated in her bag, sharp and sudden. She startled, pulling it out. Sorry. 1 second. She read the name on the screen and her face shifted. She declined the call, then tucked the phone away. Preston noticed. Everything okay? Yeah, just someone I used to work with. Probably needs a favor. He tilted his head. You don't sound thrilled. I'm not. She leaned on the railing beside him. Ever since I lost my job, a few people I thought were friends suddenly stopped answering texts. And now the ones who ignored me want help getting into your orbit. He didn't respond right away. Then, you didn't tell anyone we were together tonight? I told my best friend you asked me to dinner. That's it. I don't post my life for strangers to clap at. He smiled, not with arrogance, but something softer. That's rare. She looked at him. Do you want it posted? No, he said too quickly. Then he added, I want it real. They didn't say much after that. He walked her to the elevator, and when they reached the lobby, his hand brushed hers before he opened the car door. I'll call you, he said. You better, she replied. At home, her apartment felt even smaller than usual. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the dress she hadn't worn in over a year, still smelling of citrus and candle smoke. She could still feel the way he looked at her. Not with expectation. With curiosity. Like she was a question he wanted to spend time answering. The next few days passed in a blur of early bakery shifts and tutoring sessions, but Preston didn't vanish. He called once, then again. They met for lunch in a quiet cafe on the Upper West Side, then a walk through the sculpture garden at the museum where he proved he knew more about art than she expected. By the end of the week, they'd seen each other 4 times. Still, she kept waiting for something to snap. For him to pull away. For reality to remind her where she stood. But instead, he showed up at the bakery right before close on Friday, holding a paper bag that smelled like roasted garlic and something buttery. You haven't eaten, he said. I had a croissant. Doesn't count. She unlocked the door and let him in, pulling down the shades. They sat at the prep table in the back, eating out of containers with mismatched forks. He looked completely at ease, like he belonged there with her, surrounded by flour bins and icing bags. I want to show you something, he said after they'd eaten. She raised a brow. You're not going to tell me first? Nope. She hesitated. Am I going to regret it? Only if you hate surprises. He took her to a building she didn't recognize, somewhere south of Midtown. Not one of his towers, this one was older, with ivy crawling up the brick and a weathered blue door. Inside was a wide, airy space with high windows and sunlight pooling on the hardwood. A grand piano stood in the center, polished but worn at the keys. She turned slowly. What is this? My old studio, he said. Before everything changed. You still have it? I never let go of my backup plan. He crossed the room, sat down at the piano, and lifted the cover. Don't judge, he warned, then began to play. It wasn't perfect. Some notes wavered, others hit too hard. But it was alive, raw and real in a way that nothing else about him had been. When he stopped, he didn't look at her. She stepped closer. Why are you showing me this? Because I don't show anyone. And because I think I'm already deeper into this than I planned. Jessa's heart skipped. Into what? You. Her breath caught. Preston. I know it's fast. And I know it's insane. But when something feels this right, I don't see the point in pretending it's not. She stood there, the truth of his words sinking in. She'd been waiting for the catch, the ending. But maybe, just maybe, this was only the beginning. Rain fell in slow, silvery sheets against the windows of the old piano studio. Jessa stood just to the left of the grand piano. Her arms folded not from discomfort but because she couldn't quite trust what her hands might do otherwise. Across from her, Preston leaned on the piano bench, his fingers still resting lightly on the keys, as though he wasn't ready to let go of the music or of her. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she listened to the rain, to the soft hum of the city outside, and to the quiet between them that somehow didn't feel empty. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. Preston looked up, his expression unreadable for the first time since they met. "That depends on whether you're ready to be pulled into a world that never learned how to be gentle." She stepped closer. "You think I haven't already lived through storms?" Preston's gaze locked onto hers. "You've been through hardship, yes, but this is different. My world is full of people who only show up when there's something to take. And once you're in it, they don't let you forget it." "I'm not afraid of them," she said. "You should be, because they'll dig. They'll find out where you went to school, what your bank account looks like, who your exes are, and why you're not one of them. Then let them dig," she said. "I don't have anything to hide, but I also won't shrink myself to fit into anyone's dinner party narrative." His eyes searched hers for a long moment. Then he stood, stepping around the bench until he faced her fully. "I want you there with me, Jessa. Not just at dinners or charity auctions. I want you beside me when I sign deals, when the board disagrees with every move I make, when the press decides to twist the truth. I want you in it, not orbiting around it." She didn't look away. "Then give me a place to stand." He exhaled slowly, the weight behind that breath unmistakable. "My company's launching a new foundation aimed at expanding access to urban arts programs. I need someone to lead the community engagement division. Someone who's not afraid of people. Someone who understands what it's like to fight for something." "You're offering me a job?" she asked, surprised. "I'm offering you a position you deserve. Not out of charity. Not because of what we are. Because you're the only person I trust to build it right from the ground up." Jessa hesitated, her pulse racing. "You really think I can go from bakery shifts to board meetings? I think you've been ready for a long time. You just needed someone to say it out loud." A knock at the studio door broke the moment. Preston frowned. "That's strange. No one knows I'm here." Jessa followed him as he crossed the room and pulled the door open. A woman stood on the other side, elegant blazer soaked at the cuffs, umbrella clutched under one arm. "Clara," Preston said, stiffening. Jessa instinctively took a step back. "Sorry to interrupt," the woman said, glancing briefly at Jessa before turning her eyes back to Preston. "But I thought you should hear it from me before it hits the press." "What now?" he asked, voice clipped. "The board met without you this morning. Warner pushed through an emergency vote. They're calling for a review of your leadership after the acquisition fallout in Berlin." Preston's jaw tightened. "That deal was already collapsing before I stepped in." "Yes, but the press won't care. They'll headline it as a Kade failure." He rubbed a hand over his face. "Of course they will." Clara hesitated before adding, "They also know about Jessa." Jessa felt her stomach twist. "What do they know?" "That you exist. That you were seen with him at the Langford fundraiser. That you're not from his usual circle." Preston stepped in front of her instinctively, his posture shifting. "Tell them whatever they want. I'm not hiding her." "You should prepare for what happens next," Clara warned. "They'll spin it. They always do." "Let them," he said. Clara gave a short nod, then turned and disappeared into the rain. Jessa looked at him. "You don't have to defend me." "I want to," he said, softer now. "Not because you need it, but because you shouldn't have to do it alone." The next 72 hours were a blur. News outlets speculated wildly. Articles questioned her background, her qualifications, even her intentions. Photos of her leaving the bakery surfaced beside headlines dripping with condescension. Through it all, Preston never wavered. He issued a public statement naming her as the incoming director of the new foundation, praised her resilience, and, in a live interview, said her name with the kind of quiet certainty that silenced even the most cynical hosts. But it was Jessa who turned the tide. She stood before a packed room of journalists at the foundation's launch event, microphone in hand, and spoke not with polished charm but with undeniable truth. "I didn't grow up with money. I didn't go to Ivy League schools. But I know how to work. I know how to build trust. And I know that communities don't thrive when they're only looked at from a distance. They prosper when someone's willing to sit down at the same table and listen." The applause was hesitant at first, but it grew, and it didn't stop. That night, the gala celebrating the launch unfolded with the kind of opulence Jessa had only ever seen in movies. Crystal chandeliers, a live quartet, champagne flutes balanced on silver trays. She wore a gown Preston had sent with a handwritten note, asking only that she feel powerful in it. He found her near the balcony, away from the noise, the city stretching behind her like a promise. "You were brilliant tonight," he said, slipping a hand into hers. "I didn't faint," she teased. "You flew." He turned her gently to face him, his voice low. "I've been thinking about something." She arched a brow. "Anything terrifying?" "Only in the best way." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. But when he opened it, there was no ring inside, just a silver key. Her breath caught. "It's not a proposal," he said. "Yet. But it's the start of something. A home. A space that's ours. And when you're ready, I'll ask the other question." She looked down at the key, then up at the man who had shown her not just luxury but belief. Not just gifts, but a future. "I'm ready for all of it," she said. He leaned in and kissed her, not because the cameras were watching, but because it was the only thing left to do. The room faded. The world quieted. And somewhere, far away from the headlines and the noise, a girl who once collapsed at a finish line now stood stronger than ever beside the man who had caught her. Not because she needed saving, but because together they'd found the kind of love that doesn't just rescue, it rebuilds. Jessa stared at the silver key in her palm, nestled in velvet, the weight of it heavier than gold. Not because of its value, but because of what it meant. It wasn't just access to Preston's world, it was a choice. A doorway to a life she had never imagined could be hers. But as the gala lights shimmered around them and Preston's steady hand remained in hers, she realized she wasn't afraid of stepping through it. She looked up at him. "Where is it?" "The West Village," he said. "Townhouse. Quiet street. Walled garden in the back. I've never lived in it, it's been sitting empty for years. I bought it thinking one day I'd stop needing to live at the top of a tower." His voice softened. "Now I think I finally understand why." She closed the box gently. "I want to see it. All of it. Tomorrow," he said. "Tonight I just want to dance with you." They returned to the ballroom, and as the quartet slipped into a slow, sweeping melody, Preston took her hand and guided her to the center of the floor. The crowd parted instinctively. He didn't look at them. He only looked at her. The dance felt endless and yet far too short. She followed his lead without thinking, her body moving as if it had always known the rhythm of his. When the music faded, the world didn't rush back in. It simply paused, held in place by something stronger than spectacle. That night, back in her apartment, Jessa packed a single bag, the one her aunt had given her when she left home for college. She folded only what mattered. A photo of her parents. A scarf her grandmother had knitted. A worn paperback she reread whenever her world cracked. Everything else she left behind. The next morning, Preston was waiting outside in a charcoal coat, holding a single sunflower in one hand. "I thought roses would be too obvious," he said. She took the flower, smiling. "Sunflowers always find the light. So do you." The townhouse was everything he'd described and more. Ivy curled around the wrought iron gate, and inside, the rooms were flooded with natural light. The walls bore no art yet, the furniture minimal, the space full of potential. She wandered through each room slowly, running her hand across windowsills and doorknobs, listening to the creaks in the floorboards like they were secrets being whispered just for her. In the small sunroom at the back, she turned to him. "Can I paint here?" He blinked. "You paint?" "I used to. Not for anyone else." Just to breathe. Preston stepped forward. Then this room is yours. They spent the rest of the day filling it with color. He ordered canvases and brushes shipped overnight. She opened windows, lit candles, played music from a playlist she hadn't touched in years. They made dinner together, mushroom risotto and a salad of things neither of them could pronounce. He burned the shallots. She laughed until her sides hurt. The nights blurred into weeks. The townhouse became more than a home, it became a rhythm. Mornings with coffee on the back steps. Evenings with books and wine. In between, they built the foundation from the ground up, hiring a team of educators and artists, meeting with schools, designing programs that reached places most people ignored. The press quieted. The board backed off. Clara stepped down from her role and moved to Paris with her partner, leaving Preston to run Kade Ventures without the constant shadow of corporate manipulation. He streamlined the company, cutting dead weight, focusing on sustainability and innovation instead of expansion for expansion's sake. One afternoon, Jessa returned to the townhouse to find the garden transformed. String lights looped through the trees. A long table was set with wildflowers and crystal flutes. Friends she'd thought lost were there: Margot, her old neighbor from Queens, even one of her former high school students, now in college on a full art scholarship. Preston appeared at the end of the garden in a navy vest, no tie, sleeves rolled. He extended his hand. "You once ran 26 miles to prove something to yourself," he said. "I'm hoping you'll walk 26 feet to prove something to us." Jessa's heart swelled as she stepped forward. "I don't have a speech," he said. "You're the words I didn't know I needed." She laughed through tears. "You're the silence I didn't know I deserved." The officiant began, and under the golden haze of a New York spring sunset, Jessa Whitmore became Jessa Kade in a dress stitched with hand-painted sunflowers, barefoot in the grass, with the man who had once caught her when she fell. They didn't need a tower or a spotlight. They had something better. A home built from honesty. A love built from choice. A year later, the foundation hosted its first citywide exhibit. 500 students, 20 neighborhoods, every medium from chalk to sculpture. Jessa stood in front of a canvas covered in bold strokes and messy brilliance, arms folded, paint under her nails. Preston came up behind her, slipping his arms around her waist. "You did this." "They did this," she said, nodding toward the students. He kissed her shoulder. "You gave them the space." She turned in his arms. "We did." Back at the townhouse, the sunroom was now a studio. The walls bore her work and student sketches, pinned with clothespins and love. Their life was still full of motion, meetings, deadlines, travel, but it was also full of stillness. Of dinners cooked together. Of rain tapping on the skylight. Of two people who had found each other not in perfection, but in persistence. One evening, Preston walked into the studio holding a letter. He handed it to her. "What is it?" she asked. "Your first gallery showing. They want you. Solo." Jessa stared at him, stunned. "Why didn't you tell me? I wanted to see your face when you realized the world is finally seeing what I've known since the moment you opened your eyes in that medical tent." She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him like it was the first time, not the 1000th. And as the sun dipped below the skyline, bathing the walls in amber and rose, Preston and Jessa stood in the home they built, surrounded by art, by love, and by the life they created together, one brushstroke, one heartbeat, one promise at a time.